Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Gittin daf Tet Zion, and we are on the last line of Gittin of Tasvav Mebet. Let me share my screen, and we can really get started. Yesterday we considered whether one could combine two different methods to accomplish something when each of those methods works individually. So in the context of Gittin, Rav Chisda said that actually it does not work. So, for example, when it comes to confirming a get, there are two possibilities. One possibility is to bring two witnesses to confirm the signatures, and the second possibility is to have one witness serve as the messenger, and that messenger testify that it was written and signed in front of the person. Now, these two methods, Rav Chisda says, cannot be combined. So a get would be invalid if one witness was seen signing by the messenger and the other witness's signature was confirmed by two witnesses who know the signature. That would not be enough. And Rav Chisda makes this statement, even though if the messenger saw both witnesses sign, or the two witnesses knew both the signatures, everyone would agree that the get would be valid. Similarly, we saw Rav Chisda reach a similar conclusion with respect to whether a wall and embankment could create a private domain. So if 5 tefachim were from an embankment and 5 tefachim were from a wall, so then Rav Chisda viewed this as problematic, and it wouldn't create a rishus hayachid. What you need is a 10 tefach embankment or a 10 tefach wall. Each of those would work, but if you try to combine them together, that's going to be a problem. Not going to create a full separation. And we noted that the halacha does not follow Rav Chisda. So now that we've, and so actually a 5 tefach embankment would or could combine with a 5 tefach wall. So finally, we saw yesterday that Ilfa asked whether hands could be purified in halves, in parts. So we attempted to understand exactly what this question was about. We answered 3 different times, and each time we highlighted that if that was the question, Ilfa would have known the answer, because he knew Mishnahs and Baraisas, and so he would have known the answer because these answers were straight out of a Mishnah or a Baraisa. But now we've answered answer number 4, and answer number 4 is when it talks about washing the hands. What it means is that the hands were sufficiently wet and still wet after washing the first half of the hand, that it was sufficient to moisten something else. But we're now going to ask, maybe that can't be the case either. And that's in fact what we're going to say, but let's take a look and we'll see it inside. Again, if we take we'll back up just a little bit, to the middle of the second to last line. Lo tzricha de'ika mashka tofeach, that we're talking about where the hands are sufficiently wet that they can tofeach, they can moisten something else. Meaning, if you were to put a piece of paper against the hand and then you pull away the piece of paper, you would see a water stain on the piece of paper. All right. So now the Gemara asks in the last line, what does it make a difference if it's mashka tofeach? Who cares if you have enough liquid to moisten the hands? Because we got a Mishnah that seems to indicate that that's not wet enough to connect something, to make a difference, as we see, because Hatanan, we got a Mishnah, and this Mishnah is in Tahorot, Parachet Mishnah Tet. Hanitzok, if you have a stream of liquid, v'hakatar phrase, and you have a slope where the water is going down the slope in a aggregate form, meaning it's all connected. Umashka tofeach, and you have liquid that's sufficient to moisten. Eino chibur, that's not enough. So meaning if the stream is pouring through air, or if it's on a steep slope, that those situations where it's moving like that, or if it's just liquid enough to moisten, that is not going to cause a connection between two liquids. Lo latuma, velo latara. It won't connect them whether for to cause tuma to pass from one group of liquid to another, nor will it aggregate two bodies of water to create a single pool that is of sufficient size to be a mikvah, something that would be tahor. So effort number 5. So lo tzricha deika tofeach lahat piach. Okay, so let's actually say not that it's just wet enough to moisten something else, but rather it's wet enough that if something else were to touch it, and then that object were to touch a third thing, that the third thing would be moistened. So if I were to touch your moist hand, your sufficiently moist hands, and then touch a piece of paper, I would thereby transfer that moistness to the piece of paper. And so now when it's that moist, well, now hanami tanina, 1 second, maybe that's going to be different. But we actually have a situation where we see that it is that different, because tofeach lat chibur, we have another brisa that says that when you have something that is moist enough that if something touches it, it will cause that object to moisten a third object. Well, then that is enough to connect two liquids, either to communicate tuma or to create a mikvah that would be create tahara. So as a result, Ilfa couldn't have been concerned or uncertain about this question either. Well, dilma le'inyan mikvos. Maybe that brisa is only talking about mikvos. That's where you have bodies of water. The Rebbe Yehudahi, and it's according to Rebbe Yehuda, and therefore, and we'll have the statement by Rebbe Yehuda in a moment. And therefore, when it comes to the question of washing hands, and whether hands that are sufficiently wet that touching something else will still result in that object moistening a third object, that might we wouldn't necessarily know whether that will convey tuma or connect bodies of water that will create a mikvah. So and we can see that because we have the Mishnah, and this Mishnah is in Mikvos, Mishnah Zion, Parak Zion, Mishnah Vav. Mikvah sheyesh bo arba'im sa'a mechubanos. If you have a mikvah that has exactly 40 sa'a, the yardu shnayim v'tavlu, and you have no, Stan isn't here today. V'tavlu, and you have so we're talking about if you have a body of water that has exactly 40 sa in it, and two people go into it, one after the other. If the first person goes in and then comes out, naturally some of the water will adhere to the person's body. And so as a result, when the second person goes in, there won't be 40 sa in it. So bezeh achar zeh rishon tahor v'hasheni tamei. So the first one will become tahor because there was sufficient water in it, but the second one won't be, because when the first one leaves, he takes some of the water with him. So as a result, we won't have 40 sa of water in the mikvah. But Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im hayu raglav shel rishon nogos b'mayim av hasheni tahor. If before the first one goes out, the second one comes in, and so the first one is still standing in the water, well, that person overall is going to be sufficiently wet that if they were to touch something, that object would then still be wet enough to cause the dampness to moisten something else. And so as a result, what we're going to end up saying is that we have this principle. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi, le'inyan mikvaos, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines up from the bottom of the narrow lines in Rashi. Le'inyan mikvaos kamer. That the whole point of this answer is that when we said that tofeach lahat piach, that something that is moist enough to that when it moistens something else, it could actually connect moisten a third thing. So that second thing could moisten a third thing. That is going to be a connection that is only for mikvos. And it's Rebbe Yehuda, because Mishum good achas, because he has this principle of good achas. With good achas is this idea that that something will extend and go down. So and what does that mean? It means that the water on the person's body, when the person leaves the mikvah, that water will, it's as if it connects all the way down to the mikvah water itself. And so, and therefore, umihu, the inyan nitila, when it comes to washing hands, miboin. But as a result, Ilfa could have the question, I habi nitila ketikuna lechatzayin. Oh, lo, do we say that the natila can be done in pieces or not? And the ein rayas chibor mikvaos raya. And the whole story of whether a mikvah connects two bodies of water is not relevant to the question of whether half of a hand could be washed and then the other half of the hand. Likan, to this case. It may not be all about connection. There may be another factor that is involved, because we're not talking about simply connecting two bodies of water. We're talking about whether half of a hand after it's been washed can still be considered washed when you try to wash the other half of the hand. So, okay, so now that we've got that, so now we understand, right? So the point is that Ilfa's question is now a good question, because Ilfa's saying when your first hand is a little bit wet, and wet enough that if it were to touch something else, that object could then moisten a piece of paper, well, then your hand is sufficiently wet that in a mikvah situation, it would cause connection. And the question is what about when you wash hands? Is that sufficiently wet that we could treat this as if it's one washing, or is it not? And we have to treat it as if it's two washings, and maybe it's not a valid washing. So that's the question. Okay, and so as a result, we've now understood, again, another case of things happening in parts. So again, we've analyzed walls, and we've analyzed washing hands in parts. And now again, the Gemara considers another case of combining two different categories. So let's take a look. So Rebbe Yirmiyah says, Hare Amru. This is what the rabbis taught. Haba Rosho v'ruba b'mayim she'uvin. If somebody, and we'll see that Rashi in Masechet Shabbos says that we're talking about somebody who went to the mikvah on that day, if they immerse themselves now in a body of drawn water, which is not sufficient to, which is not water that can purify the person, well then the tahor, or somebody who's tahor, shenaflu al rosho al rubo, losha lugin mayim she'uvin, or somebody who has poured on, who's tahor and pours upon his head 3 lug of water, tameh. He is considered tameh. Now, the background for this is that we learned in Masechet Shabbos the following concern, that what might happen is that when somebody goes to the mikvah, their mikvahot were often in caves. And you can imagine that this is rainwater that had dripped into the cave and created a pool of 40 sa. That pool, which probably had, sand and dirt in it, was not a particularly clean body of water, even though it would cause a person who was tameh to become tahor. And so as a result, often a person would want to wash themselves after having gone to the mikvah. And so the rabbi said that if you wash yourself after having gone to the mikvah, you are going to still be considered tameh. And indeed, this has ramifications even today, that when a woman goes to the mikvah after the Shiva Nikiyim, after 7 clean days, in connection with her menstrual cycle. So after going into the mikvah, she should not immediately shower. Now, there's a question as to what is considered immediate, but the bottom line is that she certainly shouldn't leave the mikvah and then immediately go into the shower at the mikvah. That's certainly true. And so as a result, the rabbi said that that situation is tummy. So boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah says, I've got a question. What's the story about chetzio b'via, v'chetzio b'nefila? What happens if the person dumped water over the top half of their body and stepped in on the bottom half of their body into some standing water? What's the story then? Is that going to be, again, do we say that the two halves can combine? Because after all, if each half was a whole, it would be sufficient to cause a problem. Whereas now we've got two halves. And the answer is, Teku, we're not sure. We're going to have to wait for Eliyahu to answer the question. So, it could just mean that Teku could literally mean that it stands, meaning that that we don't have an answer, or it could be an abbreviation for Tishbi Yitaretz Kushyot Abayot, that Eliyahu, who is from who is a native of Toshab, which is that why meaning the meaning of Tishbi is the one from Toshab, so that he'll resolve the questions and the problems. And so that is the answer. So again, we're not sure whether in this case combining two things will work. So another situation where we want to try and find out whether combining two things, and another situation where again we'll find that the answer is we don't know, or we are unsure. So Amar Papa Hare Amru Bal Keri Chola Shenasnu Alav Tisha Kabin Mayim Tahor. If you have a Bal Keri who somebody who has a nocturnal emission and now is a seminal emission, and so now this person is tamei in terms of going to the Beit Hamikdash, but the rabbis made a rule that not only could he not go to the Beit Hamikdash, but he can't learn Torah either until he goes to the mikveh. However, there's a caveat, because if the person is not well, then if the rabbi said that in that situation, if he's just trying to learn Torah, not go into the Beit HaMikdash, then if you pour 9 kavim of water on top of him, then he would be tahor. So, boy, Rav Papa wondered, basically the same kind of question. If half of his body is made tahor through dipping him in the mikveh, and half of his body is attempted to be made tahor through pouring the 9 kavim of water on him, do we say that he's tahor because each of them on their own could have worked for the entire body, or do we say no, you can't combine the two methods? And so again, Teku, we are unsure. Okay, so those are our two Teku situations, and now the Gemara returns to our Mishnah. And we're going to have two different approaches. And these two approaches are the approaches that I mentioned yesterday when we learned the Mishnah. And specifically, again, the Mishnah said, Echad Omer b'fanai nechtav, ve'echad Omer b'fanai nechtam. We are going to say that the get is pasul, that the get is not kosher, the get is invalid. And so the Gemara qualifies, and we're going to have two possibilities. The first, same people are going to say each of them. We're just not sure which was what they said. So Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yochanan Lo Shanu Ela She'ein Haget Yotze Mitachas Yedei Shneim. When we say that the two people have come and say, one of them says it was written in front of me, and the other one says it was signed in front of me, when does that not work? That doesn't work if both of them weren't made the messengers. If both of them had in fact been made the messengers, if in fact the two of them were to come and say these statements, one of them says it was written in front of me, and the other one says it was signed in front of me, then it would be valid. And so as we turn then kasher. As we turn to Ted Zion Amabet. Alma, so what does this it appear? It appears that Kasavar, Rabbi Yochanan would say, Shnaim sheheviu get min bedinas hayam, that if two people bring a get from overseas, they don't have to say together that it was written and signed before of them, meaning because one of them can say one and the other can say the other. What seems to be going on here is really it's all about the two of them are effectively can be witnesses of the validity of the signature of the person. And that's all you need. You don't need to have the b'fanei nektam when you have two people serving as the messenger. So Amar le Abaye says, Elamiyata Sefer Dikatani Shnayim Omrim B'fanenu Nechtav Ve'echad Omer B'fanei Nechtam Pasul. Well, one second, Rabbi Yehuda Machshir. So when we had the situation of two people saying it was signed in my presence, it was written in our presence, and one person saying it was signed in my presence, and we said that was pasul, and Rabbi Yehuda said it was kosher, that it was valid. Taima de'ein haget yotzim mitachas yedei shneim. Are you telling me that the reason that the rabbi said it was a problem is only because all three of these people were not made messengers, but haget yotzim mitachas yedei shneim? But if two of them had been messengers, meaning the one who said that he saw the signing, and one of the ones who said it was written in our presence, then machsherei rabbanan, the rabbis would have said that it was kosher. Is that what you're saying, Rav Shmuel, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan? And so Amar le, yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. Well, one second. Now Abaye, now that Abaye has set him up, he's going to ask the Bam Kasha, v'chi ein get yotze mitachas yedei shnehem. Well, one second. If you say that when the get is brought by the two of them as messengers, then what in the world are they arguing about? Meaning, what does it make a difference to the rabbis, right? The rabbis say, so Rabbi Yehuda's makes total sense, because Rabbi Yehuda says, I don't care whether the two of them are messengers or not. It's they should be. I'm sorry. My apologies. What's the story with Rabbi Yehuda's position? Because the rabbi's position is clear, right? We've just explained it. The rabbi's position is that when you have the two people serving as joint messengers, well, then because they served as joint messengers, so then one of them can talk about the writing and one of them can talk about the signing. But when they're not both messengers, then it's going to be problematic. But Rabbi Yehuda says both situations are not problematic. So explain that to us. So the explanation, Rabbi Shmuel responds, Mar Savar. So the rabbis would say, Gazrinan Dilma Asya Lachlufe Bekiyum Shtaris Alma. That look, if in fact the rabbis would say that when you don't have both of them people serving as messengers, well, then we have a concern that people are going to confuse this case with the case of an ordinary document. And because we've allowed one witness to confirm the signatures, maybe in an ordinary document case, and that witness was the messenger, we'll allow one witness who's the messenger to confirm documents in a ordinary case. So be'ed echad, we're going to allow them to use one witness there as well. Umar Savar lo gazrinan. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, no, look, we already have here, even though they're not messengers, we already have here two witnesses who confirm the proper nature of the writing of the document. And because we have two witnesses who confirm the proper nature of the writing of the document, all we need the messenger to do is confirm that the signatures were done properly. And that's what he's doing. So that should be sufficient. And we don't have to worry about other kinds of document cases. So that's what's going on. And that's what the machlokus is about. So again, according to this first approach, when our Mishnah said one witness said it was written in front of me and the other witness says it was signed in front of me, that's because those two witnesses were not both the messengers. And that's why it was not kosher. But Lishna Achrina Amrela, but now we have another version that says Amar Shmuel Bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yochanan Afilu get Yotze Mitachas Yidei Shneim. Even if the get was delivered by the two of them, puzzle, it's going to be invalid. So what's the explanation? How come? Well, what and therefore what? Alma, what do we see from this? That Rabbi Yochanan holds, Kasavar, Shnayim Sheheviu get me Medina Sayam, Tzrikin Sheyomer B'fanenu Nechtav B'fanei Nechtam. It's clear that when two people, even when two people bring the get, they're going to both have to say, it was written in front of me and it was signed in front of me, because we need to have both aspects. So Amrle Abaye is going to now go through the same process of trying to understand what the story is. Elamiata, Seifa de Katani, in the end of our Mishnah, where it says, Shnaim Omrim B'fanenu Nechtav, Ve'echad Omer B'fanei Nechtam, and two people say it was written in our presence, and one person says it was signed in our presence, puzzle, and we said it was puzzle. The Rabbi Yehuda Machshir, and Rabbi Yehuda said it was kosher. Afilu get Yotze Mitachas Yidei Shneihen. Are you telling me that when the rabbi said it was puzzle, it was even when the get was produced by the two of them, Pasle Rabbanan, the rabbis would say it was puzzle, Amrlai, and yeah, that's exactly right. So, but my kamivlagi, again, Abaye wonders, what are they arguing about? Meaning, why in the world would Rabbi Yehuda hold that a get was valid when the two of them were not both part of the same messenger service, meaning they were not all messengers. So why would it be valid according to Rabbi Yehuda? So Mar Savar she'ein bekian lishma, umar Savar lefi she'ein edim mitzuyan lekaimo. So here's the explanation for the machlokas. The rabbis say that the concern is that we're worried about whether or not it was done lishma. And so as a result, if the messengers themselves are not the ones who are testifying about the writing, so it's going to be problematic no matter what. You need a message, even if it's a messenger is testifying, frankly, about the writing. If he's not also testifying about the signing, then we're concerned about the entire process and making sure that the entire thing was done lishma. Umar Savar, and the other holds, Lafisha ein edim mitzuyan lekaimo, because the Rabbi Yehuda says that the concern is a lack of available witnesses. But here, Rabbi Yehuda sees that there are plenty of witnesses, and so as a result, it's totally fine when you have multiple messengers, or you have multiple people testifying about the writing of the get. So now, in second, this reminds us that there was a machlokus, because when we taught our very first Mishnah and we asked the question, why is it that we have to say b'fanei nechtav u'b'fanei nechtam? We had two opinions. We had Rabbah, who said that the concern was about lishma, and we had Rava, who said that the concern was about whether or not we were going to have witnesses. Well, we've just made the machlokus between the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda about that exact issue. So the Gemara asks the logical question, Lema de Rabba v'Rava Tanaihi. So we could actually say that the machlokus between Rabba and Rava with respect to the rationale for having to say b'fanei nechtav u'b'fanei nechtam is actually a machlokus between the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah. So the Gemara answers, no, it does not have to be that way. Rava mataritz l'kilish nakama, that maybe Rava would explain the machlokus in our Mishnah like the first approach. Remember that the first approach was saying that if, in fact, you had only one messenger, so then if you have one person says b'fanei nechtav and the other person says b'fanei nechtam, well, then it won't work. But if those two people are both messengers, well, then it will work. And why? Because this is really all about making sure we've got sufficient witnesses. And so as a result, if we've got sufficient witnesses, so then it's not, who cares what they say? Really, they don't even have to say anything according to this understanding. And so that would be, and everybody agrees with that. And what are they arguing about? They're arguing about whether or not, and the question in terms of Rabbi Yehuda's position is, do we say that you need the both to be messengers, or do you not? And Rabbi Yehuda would say you don't need them both to be messengers because we have two people. And the Rabbanan would say, no, we do need to have them both be messengers so that we don't get confused with other cases. The Rabbah Amarlach. So that's how Rava could understand it, and the entire Mishnah would be consistent with him. The Rabbah Amarlach, and Rabbah would say to you, "Dekuliyama be'inan lishma." Really, everybody agrees. Both Rabbah, both the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda would agree that you actually do need lishma, and that's the reason that we instituted the rule to say b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam, and and here's what the debate is all about. La'achar shalamdu. This debate is actually after everybody learned the halacha. So nowadays that we learn the halacha, then everybody knew that you had to write it lishma. And so the question is, what the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda are arguing about is whether or not we're worried about the situation reverting to where people no longer knew about the requirement to write lishma. And so how do we understand it? Demar Savar Gazrinan, the rabbis say we are worried about the possibility of going back to the bad old days when nobody knew outside of the land of Israel that a get needed to be written lishma. And so as a result, because we are worried about that, if we don't do the b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam exactly correctly, we are going to say that the get is pasul because we're worried that maybe we'll come at some future point to no longer know that it needs to be written lishma, and we will think that it's okay if it's not written lishma. And so as a result, because of that concern, we need to make sure that the messengers say the right thing. And so if you have two messengers, it doesn't matter. They need to say b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam. Umar savar lo gazrinan. And the Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we don't worry about that. We don't worry about the situation where maybe we'll go back to the bad old days. And therefore, even though really the messengers should say, especially when there's one messenger, the one single messenger should say b'fanai nechtav u'b'fanai nechtam, if in fact we have two witnesses to the validity of the writing, well then the fact that we have one witness who's the messenger testifying to the validity of the signing, well, that's sufficient because we're not worried about things going back to the bad old days. Okay, so that's the explanation. And so now we have, oh boy, I didn't realize I forgot to rotate. So let me rotate again. This is so now we've got these different positions. And now we have the question, the liflug nami Rabbi Yehuda bereisha. And so, and let's see, where are we? So we're now up to right up to here, up to this question on the screen. In that case, well, why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda disagree about the case of one witness about the writing and one witness about the signing? Remember, in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda waited to disagree. We had two rulings in a row. Ruling number one was one witness about the writing and one witness about the signing. And then ruling number two is two witnesses about the writing and one witness about the signing. Well, and it was only then that Rabbi Yehuda disagreed. Why didn't he disagree earlier in the Mishnah? So, v'liflog nami Rabbi Yehuda bereisha, why he should have disagreed in the earlier case. So, it was actually said about this to answer that question. Amar Ula, really, Rabbi Yehuda does disagree in the first case. So actually, it all makes sense. So again, this all now makes sense. We can explain it according to both Rabbah and Rava. We can explain it and make it all consistent throughout the Mishnah. And so as a result, we are in a good position. But now Rav Oshia tries to throw a wrench in the whole thing. So must have Rav Oshia Leula. Rav Oshia asked, 1 second, we have a brisa that seems to contradict you, Ula. Rabbi Yehuda Makshir Bezu v'lo Bacheres, because the brisa says that when Rabbi Yehuda makes his ruling that the get is kosher, when there are 2 witnesses about the writing and only 1 witness about the signing, it's that is specifically in this case and not in another case. So what do you think the other cases? Isn't the other case the one involving where 1 witness said it was signed in front of me and 1 witness says it was written in front of me? And so therefore Rabbi Yehuda does not dispute the rabbis in that case, unlike what Ula said. So Ula says, no, lo, lema'ute nechtam aval lo b'fanai nechtam aval lo b'fanai nechtam. No, what he's excluding is what happens is the very first case in our Mishnah, where 1 person says it was signed in front of me and nobody says it was written in front of me. Because I might have thought, how below Gaza Rabbi Yehuda Gzeira Shema Yaxor Ladavar Lekil Kulo, that because Rabbi Yehuda is not in fact concerned about things going back to the bad old days and people not knowing Lishma, Dilma Asil Ichalufi Bikiyum Stars da Alma Be'eda Echad Nami Lo Gazar. Maybe he won't also be worried about people being confused that because we will allow 1 witness in the case of a get to come and just say b'fanai nechtam that it was signed in front of me, maybe we won't be worried that we'll allow 1 witness to talk about the signatures in an ordinary case. So Kamash Malan, the Gemara comes to teach us, no, in fact, this is not the story. We are going to be concerned about it. We are worried. Even Rabbi Yehuda would be worried about that kind of confusion. If we allow 1 messenger witness to say that all that happened in front of him with respect to the get was that it was signed in front of him, we are worried that people will think that, hey, this shows that ordinary contracts could also be confirmed with a single messenger witness. And that is not the case. And we don't want that confusion. And therefore, we make the messenger talk about writing, which isn't relevant in an ordinary contract case. So Itmar Nami, and we actually have a teaching by an Amora that confirms the fact that Yehuda and the Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis argue. And of course, to make things a little more confusing, this statement was made by the Amora Rav Yehuda. So Amor Rav Yehuda, Shnayim Shehiviu get me bedinas hayam. Banu lemachlokas Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Rabbanan. If 2 people bring a get from overseas, we have come to the machlokas of the Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis. Meaning, 1 of them will say b'fanai nechtav, and 1 of them will say b'fanai nechtam, and Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis will disagree. Rabbi Yehuda will say that it actually is a valid get, and the rabbis would say, no, it's not a valid get. And so we see that the machlokas with respect to 2 witnesses about the writing and 1 witness about the signing will also apply to a situation of 1 witness about the writing and 1 witness about the signing. Okay, well, so what happened in the times of the Gemara in practice? So for that, you will need to stay tuned, God willing, for tomorrow's daf. And with that, we will wish you a wonderful, wonderful day.
James is here.
I think
Thank
James is
you.
on the 2nd floor. All right, have a great day.
Mark.
Yes.
He's on the 2nd floor.
Oh, okay.
We'll go now.
Yeah.
Bye.